Alright, Travis Wayne Goodsell. How do we know the Book of Mormon is true or plagiarized? And if it's plagiarized, why? Obviously, you need facts. Primary source documentation that establish what the facts are. And people like to claim, well, too much time has gone by, there's no way to know, we weren't there, blah, blah, blah. Well, how do police do it? When somebody's murdered, how do they do an investigation and make any arrests? They weren't there. How do they know? If nobody comes forward to say, so-and-so did it, how do they know? Where do they need to go to check? The evidence. You get an identification of the person. And that can be done through fingerprinting. It can be done through DNA now. If they've still got their wallet, if it wasn't for a robbery. So there's teeth, dental records. And so there are ways to identify a person. And then they go from there. Finding out who knew this person, who's involved in their life, who they work with, and who they associate with, who their friends are, who their family are. And so when we go back in time, it's similar. You've got to identify the facts. So with the Book of Mormon, Book of Mormon claims it was found on the Hill Cumorah. That's what Joseph Smith says, Hill Cumorah. And we have evidence of people who claimed we went to dig on the Hill Cumorah and we couldn't find anything. We couldn't even find the stones from which it was supposed to be placed or the hole from where it would have been taken. And we certainly didn't find no cave of records. And so, how then do we know? Because we don't have the actual plates, do we? If we had the actual plates, what could we do? We could have somebody decipher it, if it needs to be deciphered, if it's not a language already known. It claims to be written in Egyptian. Yes, Mormon's Egyptian. Small plates were written in Egyptian. It's not until Mormon that it was written in Reformed Egyptian, as he calls it. And that's a clue to the identity of whether the Book of Mormon is true or plagiarized. Because the text of the Book of Mormon is also evidence. You can know from the text whether it's true or whether it's plagiarized. And obviously, if you've gone to school, I'm pretty sure they teach that here in Utah, don't they? How not to plagiarize a book, that you need to put it in quotes and you need to reference it if you're quoting from somebody, and that you can't just claim somebody else's words as your own. And so there are people, linguists, who have gone through the Book of Mormon and have identified plagiarism. And not only plagiarism, but linguistic patterns. And Sidney Rigdon is claimed by these who did the research as the author of the Book of Mormon. And so, is it correct or is it incorrect? Well, the evidence shows that yes, his pattern of speech is in the Book of Mormon. And the books that are plagiarized are confirmed. People are able to show, side by side, the different books, whether it be the 1769 King James Version or the Late War. It's a longer title, but the Late War. And there's a person online who's got that listing. You can Google search it. The Late War side by side with the Book of Mormon, I think, will that Google search should bring up the link. And you can see for yourself that, oh yeah, it's too close to claim as their own writing, and it's too close to claim that it was ancient ancestors here in America to have written it, and it just happens to correspond closely with a modern day book at the time it was being translated, as they claim. And so now that we've established that yes, the book is plagiarized and it's not an accurate history of the people on the Americas anciently, then do we stop right there? No. Now you got to figure out why. Why did they plagiarize a book? Was it just to make money? Possibly, because they lived a poor life. Joseph Smith Sr. struggled because of the circumstances of the day, the failure of the crops out in Vermont, and Joseph needing the surgery on his leg. They had to pay for that, you know. They don't talk about in the church history how they paid for it. They don't talk about what Joseph Smith Sr.'s job was when he was in Palmyra. When they got the farm, they failed with the crops on that farm, and then the farm went into foreclosure, and then the other man bought up the property and let the Smiths rent the house. And so, yeah, they never had money, and they went to Martin Harris, who had money, and they then had to go back to him after losing 116 pages to get money. And so if Sidney Rigdon is the one who wrote the book, and Sidney Rigdon was the one who plagiarized the book, if he's the author, he plagiarized it, well, how do we know that? Where's the connection? Because the records show that he wasn't baptized in the church until December of 1830. And it was Parley P. Pratt who was in New York when he just happened to meet somebody with the Book of Mormon. And then Parley P. Pratt goes to his hometown there in Ohio, where Sidney Rigdon was his pastor at that church Sidney Rigdon was running. And so how did it all work out? And you may say, oh, we'll never know, we can never know, but that's important, because we know the book was plagiarized and that Sidney Rigdon is the major author of the book. So how did Sidney Rigdon become connected with the Smiths before the church started and Sidney Rigdon eventually joined? And so you might have heard about Sidney Rigdon being in Pittsburgh and had a locker with Solomon Spaulding, or in the same post office. But when you check the timelines of when Solomon Spaulding was there, when he died, and when Sidney Rigdon was there, and when he came back, because Sidney Rigdon left and then came back. And then where was Harmony, Pennsylvania? When these are facts that we can identify because we have maps. We can go to a map and we can look up Harmony, Pennsylvania. Oh, okay, it's direct north from Pittsburgh. Is Pittsburgh a major city? Yes. And so with Josiah Stoll, who hired Joseph Smith to dig for the silver in the mine, they would have needed supplies, they would have needed provisions, where would they have gone to get it? You know, maybe there was a little trading post in Harmony where Emma Smith lived, but you know, is there a link between Joseph Smith being there at the time Sidney Rigdon was there? And then look at the evidence of the first records that is attributed to Joseph Smith as receiving revelation concerning the Book of Mormon. Look at the dating. Look at the history of Joseph Smith. What happened in Joseph Smith's life around that time? See, the church leaves out a whole bunch of information because Joseph eloped with Emma. Where did they elope? Well, when you find out that they were married in Bainbridge, New York, which was the exact town where Joseph Smith was arrested for being a glass looker, I think it was, where the court record has been preserved and is now all over the internet. We can actually see it for ourselves in the original writing that it was a misdemeanor, and we know the fine amount, $2 and something. And so that's strange. And then you find out, well, why was he in jail? Then you find out it was Josiah's nephew, I think. It was a relative of Josiah Stoll, who was complaining that Joseph Smith was frauding Josiah Stoll, thus the glass looker accusation. And then Joseph Smith goes back to work for Josiah Stoll. And then when you find other evidence that the farm had built by Joseph Smith Sr., because it was just land at first. The original home had to be built, and then other things were built, the farm, the barnyard, or whatever they call it. I didn't grow up on a farm. My dad did, and my parents got rid of me one summer to go to my cousin's farm, or my aunt and uncle's farm. My farmyard experience is limited to Sesame Street. But there was a coppersmith shop built on the farm. It's still identified from a picture that was made about what was there. And so what's a coppersmith shop doing there? Because there's no record of Joseph Smith Sr. working with copper. And so you have Joseph Smith, who's over southeast of or southwest of his original family, with Josiah Stoll out there in Harmony, Pennsylvania, and then that's where Martin Harris is asked to come, because Martin Harris is from Palmyra. And so, as you can see, there's an intricate web of facts that all need to be factored in together. We can't just say, oh, we've established that the Book of Mormon is plagiarized, and that's the end of it. Because there's more to the story. And if we just do what the church has done and dismiss the rest of the story, we're not going to know what really happened and why the Book of Mormon was written. And so you might have recognized that I've also done a playlist for Book of Mormon code. The Book of Mormon is encoded. How did I know that? Well, when I did my research on the church and was going through all of these intricate webs to tie them all together, I found out that yes, they were involved in plagiarism, and I recognized in one of the books that nobody else had recognized was being plagiarized, which I did the video on Brethren Ado, because everybody just says and focuses on Ado. It's Brethren Ado. That's the plagiarism. And then I recognized the rest of the passage, and I went, wait a minute, whoa, whoa, whoa. I'm recognizing other things contemporary with the early 1800s. And then as I read it, I read it in the context of the coding of the book that was plagiarized. That's the part that's plagiarized is the key to the book that you're supposed to go to. If you've seen the movie National Treasure, they have the cipher coding, where they had to go to, I think it was Benjamin Franklin's pages that were in that one library, and the kid was paid to go in and get the letters that corresponded with the numbers from the code. That's one type of coding that was done in those early days. We know that the Smiths were involved in coding. Why? Because the Doctrine and Covenants of 1835 was encoded. How do we know that? Well, because the 1979 version of the scriptures, the triple combination, came out first, and then, or no, the Bible came out in 79, the triple combination came out in 81, and then they switched it around for the 2013 release. They took out the coding and put in the actual names of the people that were encoded. And so now you read the Doctrine and Covenants and you see the actual names. But the 1835 is available online. You can find it, you can read it, and you'll see the coded names. And so that there is another piece of evidence that the Smiths were involved with coding. So not only was coding popular in that day, but the Smiths were also involved with coding with the Doctrine and Covenants. And so what I recognized was that the plagiarism signaled that the passage encapsulated around the plagiarism was the coded message. And the way to interpret it is through the book that was plagiarized. So Brethren Ado was plagiarized from the book attributed to William Morgan. And it was his Illustrations of Masonry. So now you have to do a whole research thing on William Morgan and how he connected with the Smiths, if at all. Because maybe it was just a book that they bought from the bookstore or the trading post. But again, it would have been Sidney Rigdon. Sort of. Jacob has some Parley P. Pratt and also Oliver Cowdery. And so when you realize there are different authors in the Book of Mormon, then you got to figure out who are these other authors and how do they fit into the big picture. And so yeah, from Jacob is where we get Brethren Ado, and it's plagiarized from William Morgan's attributed book, Illustrations of Masonry. And so when you realize also, when you look at the history of Smith Sr. and Hiram Smith, we have the documented evidence that they were both Freemasons in the York Rites. Way back in 1826. And Smith Sr., once he moved from Vermont to Palmyra. And that evidence shows the location of where those lodges were. And so you factor in those. And so you realize that Smith Sr.'s lodge was south of Palmyra and west of Bainbridge, and still northeast of Harmony. And then you realize William Morgan was thrown in jail in the town where Joseph Smith Sr. was a lodge member and was raised to the rank of Master Mason, which is only level 3, but York is lesser ranks than the Scottish Rites. And so, as you can see, more and more and more and more comes out that need to be factored in to the Book of Mormon and how it came about. And so to just say, oh, it's plagiarized, okay, but is it a bad thing or a good thing? You know, you can say, well, plagiarism is bad no matter what. Okay, so why? Why did they do it? And until you do that, you're never going to know the truth. You've got to go through all of the strands. And so D. Michael Quinn, you might be familiar with his book, Mormonism, Magic, and the Worldview, something like that, where he is able to identify the magical view, folklore of the Western New York in the early 1800s, and how it was considered magic and witchcraft. And so, are you just going to take his word for it and assume that Joseph was a practicing warlock? Or is there more to the story? And then, as you go on, yes, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has now gone on to their gospel topic essays and claimed Joseph Smith was a polygamist. Wow, that's big news. Because the Book of Mormon has 3 instances where no polygamy is allowed. The 1835 Doctrine and Covenants has no polygamy allowed. And so, was Joseph Smith just lying through the Book of Mormon and the Doctrine and Covenants? Or is there more to the story that needs to be factored in before we can make a conclusion about our feelings about Joseph Smith? And so, yeah, it's frustrating to talk to Mormons and to critics, because both pull the same stunts. And when a guy like me comes along and says, no, there's more information, I get attacked by both. And so, you know, it's like, why should I bother if nobody's going to care to know the truth? Because apparently everybody's picked their sides between Republicans and Democrats. Oh, I mean, pro-Mormon or anti-Mormon. See what I mean? Nobody cares about the facts anymore. Nobody wants to know the truth. Nobody searches for the truth. And so when I did, and I found out both are wrong, that there's a third option, I'm the one who's targeted for hatred by both sides. So, you know, to skip to the ending of the book, the Book of Mormon has a coded message for us. And it's a warning. And if you don't care, because what's going on right now was warned about in the Book of Mormon. And if you're going to attack me and blame me, that's stupid. Because the consequences are going to happen to us. So, oh well.